Hello and welcome back to Chiefsman's Corner, the recorded version. I'm your host, Coach Winuvas, one of the leadership team here in the WFL and the GML, the coach of the WFL Los Angeles Rams as well as the GML New Orleans Saints. A bit of admin work before I start. Next week will not see a new corner out and available as I will be out of town early next week on spring break. So the next time you hear from me for WFL and honestly for GML might be our draft show. At least in WFL it'll be live. And the GML, you'll hear from me during draft time. It could be that quick of an advance. We'll be talking all things WFL and GML in this show. As usual, we're going to talk Week 16 WFL action, and we're going to talk Week 10 action in GML. We're going to talk about players of the podcast for both the WFL and for the GML. And we do have a question in our Ask the Chief segment. And one thing I want to note is we technically had two questions. Unfortunately, one of them was submitted via DM and not through the Ask the Chief forum. That's not the reason I'm going to not answer it, however. I'm not going to answer it because I didn't have time before sitting down to record this podcast to do the proper research the question requires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to file it away as a little nugget for the next time I do a show, and I will answer it on that next show because it involves talking about statistics and quarterbacks in the GML, and I don't want to leave anything out. I don't want to do my due diligence on it. So a little kind of admin work before we get started. If you are watching the premiere of this, thank you, welcome. Leave any comments in the YouTube chat. I should be around to talk with you at 9 p.m. Eastern time is when this will drop. Any and all support you give is appreciated, whether you watch the premiere of this or whether you watch it well after the fact. Without you guys, the WFL community doesn't really exist. The first thing we're going to talk about, as always, is the WFL's incentive plan, especially with the offseason looming very closely in the crosshairs. The incentive plan will allow you to get some perks that aren't available for every member simply by doing some extracurricular activities that involve WFL. Anything from Twitter to articles on the Neon Sports site to commenting or participating in this show, even chatting in Discord can earn you experience points. Anything that makes the WFL a more immersive experience and increases its presence in the Madden community can earn you some sort of credit. A link to the incentive plan is available using the command /incentive plan, that is all one word, /incentive plan, in Discord. The next thing to talk about is our Ask the Chief form. This is the form you can use during the week between episodes or between 2 weeks of episodes to submit any questions you have for me, and I'll answer them during the show, giving you credit for the question. It's an easy way to build up incentive points and provide extra content for the podcast. Use the command /AskTheChief, all one word, /AskTheChief to pull up the form in Discord. As mentioned earlier, with the advent of the WFL offseason approaching, it's time to start thinking about our WFL end-of-season survey. You can use this to interact with me on ideas and improvements for WFL. Feedback is always appreciated, good or bad, and responded to, good or bad. Look for the survey to launch in the next game week or two on the WFL. Actually, at this point, it is already launched. You can use /WFL survey, that is all one word, /WFL survey, to get the current season's form. Fill that out, and as soon as I get notification, I will get with you and talk with you in a one-on-one basis. It may be a little delayed due to me going out of town this week as of the recording of this video, but I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can to talk anything about WFL and how to improve it going forward. Lastly, I want to invite anyone who's interested to try out our GM-only league, the GML. If you have any interest, I can link you our rule set that we have in place. We do slow sim games only, so it's no usering. If you want to flex your GM muscles, this is the league to do it in. You can DM me if you have any questions about it. We're nearing our 4th season's end, and there are plenty of teams worth jumping onto for the end of the N24 cycle going into Madden 25. With housekeeping out of the way, let's get this show on the road. And we start with the AFC South and the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts matching up. The Colts squeak out a 1-point victory, 32-31, against the Tennessee Titans as the Colts rise to 10-4-1 on the season and the Titans fall to 7-9. Another AFC South foe falls as the Houston Texans host the Denver Broncos and lose 37-21 as the Broncos creep up to close to 500 at 7-8, while the Texans fall closer to 500 at 9-7. In the beatdown of the week, as the CPU Rams take on the Seattle Seahawks, I was on autopilot for this one, and the Seahawks beat the Rams like a drum, as they should. 45-3 is your final there. Seahawks moved to 11-3-1, well-earned division win for Polio and the Seahawks, as the Rams, rightfully so, fall to 5-11 and the joke of the NFC West cellar. And more action as the Cardinals get their 6th win of the season, as Johnny Football carries his Cardinals to victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars, the WFL Bowl champs, who fall to 6-10 and last in their division. So they go from first to worst right now as we get near season's end. Not looking good for the Jacksonville Jaguars. They're going to miss the playoffs after winning the WFL Bowl just a year ago, similar to the Colts. So 24-20 your final there. The Cardinals go up to 6-9, while the Jaguars again fall to 6-10. In a little bit of an upset, but not really. I got to stop saying that. The Patriots meet the Buffalo Bills and beat them by 6 points. 33-27 is your final here. Patriots are above 500 at 9-7, having a really, really good season, while the Buffalo Bills and Meat Boy fall to 11-5. Still a top end of the division, but that is a tough AFC East now. As the Jets are finding out, the new Jets owner, Pinker Floyd, falls to the Cincinnati Bengals 31-17. Rusta and his offense carry him to victory once again, and 13-3 is the Bengals record, while the Jets fall to 7-9 in a tough division that the Jets fall into. Does the Pinker Floyd in a simulated game? The Lions and Bears NFC North matchup. The Lions take this one 35-14 is your final. Detroit moves to 6-10, while the Bears fall to 13-3. In another simulated affair, the 49ers earn their 3rd victory of the season with a 31-27 win over the Carolina Panthers, and the Panthers fall to 1-14 on the season. Another 1-14 team as they continue their fall. The Las Vegas Raiders lose by 2 to the Baltimore Ravens, 33-31 your final here. The Ravens take it up to 4-11. Disappointing season for the Ravens, disappointing season for the Raiders. Both teams are looking to rebound in the offseason. And a little bit of a stunner between 5 and 10 teams, or 4 and 9 or whatever. The Packers overcome the Browns 49-34 is your final. Ross and the Browns fall to 5-11 as the Packers take a win and go up to 5-10. In a bit of a surprise and a beatdown, the Chargers beat down the Commanders 34-3 your final here. The Chargers move to 12-4 on the season, while the Commanders fall to 11-5 after a really, really strong start. They're starting to kind of falter in that NFC East are the Commanders, and opening up the door for guys like the Giants and the Eagles to step on through. And speaking of the Eagles, they do make their way closer to that division lead with a 22-17 win over the Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles move to 10-6, while the Bansheeman and his Chiefs fall to 3-12. In Game of the Week action, North foes on different sides of the conference meet as the Vikings and Steelers fight it out in Pittsburgh, but the Vikings come away with the 3-point win. 31-28 is your final. The Vikings move to 11-5 on the season, while Chilkey and the Steelers go to 8-8 on the season. In a NFC South matchup that was a pretty much a one-sided affair, the Falcons move to 11-5 with a 34-7 romp over the New Orleans Saints, who fall below 500 at 7-8 on the season. NFC East foes meet, and unlike the first time when the Cowboys snuck one on the Giants were ready for them this time, and they win 26-10. After a slow start, Cly has his Giants on pace to lead his division at 11-5, tied with the Commanders for top in the division, and that NFC East is making a blockade to try and block anyone else from getting into the playoffs. Miami and their comeback story of last year continues. They go from basically first pick in the draft to leading their division at 13-3 with a 35-13 whooping on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who fall to 9-6, and that is your Week 16 action for the WFL. And I'd like to call out my players of the podcast for the WFL. And for the WFL, the offensive player of the podcast is going to be from that last game, Dolphins quarterback, Cole Meredith, who went 25 of 31 for 410 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions in that 35-13 win over the Buccaneers. And my defensive player of the podcast, I technically will cheat and have 2. One of them I just had to mention, so it's the honorable mention. But the one who wins it is going to be Giants outside linebacker Azeez Ojulari. 5 tackles, 4 sacks, a forced fumble, and a 26-10 win over the Cowboys in a week that didn't see a lot of big-time defensive standouts. That was a big-time defensive standout. But I do want to give a shout-out because it was a 31-28 game of the week. The Vikings won by 3, and they had a defensive end who had an unusual stat line. He had an interception, and it was a pick 6. I don't think I've seen a defensive end have a pick 6 ever before, at least not in Madden, at least not with a stat line doing these shows. So I want to give a shout out, even though you didn't win player of the podcast. I had to shout that out because in a 3-point game, that's basically the difference. So defensive end DJ Wanham for the Vikings, by the way, is the one who had the unusual stat line in my week 16 WFL games. And with that, we will move on to our week 10 GML games right now. Get it pulled up here. Oops. Wrong one. My bad. You're going to see all kinds of stuff. There we go. Sorry about that. There we go. There it is. So we start with a game between our user Lions owner and the Titans CPU, and the Lions win 20-10 here. I believe this was a simulated affair. He didn't have time to get to this when he was out of town. Studley and his Falcons beat up on the Chicago Bears 31-9. Your final here, as the Falcons move to 9-1 and the Bears fall to 1-10. Tennessee, by the way, falls to 4-6, and the Lions run to 7-3. Cardinals, with a little bit of a slow start, end up beating the Saints 21-16. Definitely were sleeping on the Saints and nearly got beat. But the Saints do fall to 2-9 on the season, while the Cardinals move to 8-2 on the season. Colts and Fernando win a 6-point victory over the AFC South Jacksonville Jaguars. The Colts move to 8-3 on the season, while the Jaguars fall to 3-7. In a 3-point affair, a little bit more of a defensive stalwart setup than what you might think. The Panthers eke out a victory after just beating down folks offensively. I believe Bryce Young had a couple interceptions in this game, but they eke out the victory 13-10 over Bradster and the Browns. Bradster and the Browns fall to 3-8 on the season. Newcomer Rusta plays his first game or second game as the Bengals in GML and beats up on the Ravens 37-10. Your final here. The Bengals move to 7-4 while the Ravens move to 3-7. But good news, Ravens, in Week 12, guess who you meet? That's right, you meet the Saints. CPU action, 44-38, your final between the 49ers and Raiders. Raiders CPU 3-7, 49ers CPU 5-6. Another CPU game between the Buccaneers and Vikings ends in a 7-point affair. Vikings at home get the victory 21-14. Tampa Bay Buccaneers fall to 4-6, while the Minnesota Vikings rise to 4-6. As the Commanders and Senna get beat by the Green Bay Packers CPU 34-9, it was a rough affair, it looked like, for the Commanders as they fall to 5-5 at 500 at Week 10 action, while the Packers get up to 500 at 5-5. Big Pun Love has lost a game finally against the CPU Giants 35-10 in a big-time upset, quite honestly, as the Giants move to 3-8 while the Texans fall to 8-2. Ross is back as the Miami Dolphins, and in one of his first games as back as one of the people in GML. He loses by 8 to the Buffalo Bills, 29-21. His Dolphins fall to 6-4, while the Buffalo Bills move to 8-2. Kobe Burris has won again by 6. He is at 5-5 on the season, 23-17. Your final at home against the Chargers, who fall to 8-3. Game of the week action between CPU opponents, the Patriots and Chiefs, and the Chiefs beat up on the Patriots 35-14. Your final here, the Chiefs CPU is at 6-5, while the Patriots CPU is at 5-5. And finally, the last game on the docket, a 7-point affair as the Seahawks CPU overcomes the Rams and Louis 21-14. Again is your final. Seahawks are 3-7, while the Rams, after a little bit of an upset, are at 7-4. And that does it for your GML Week 10 wrap-up. And I want to go over our offensive and defensive players of podcast for the GML. And by the way, these are only going to target teams with a user. For the offense, I'm going to target Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson, who went 26 of 33 for 291 yards and 2 touchdowns and no picks. as well as 11 carries for 64 yards in a 23-17 win over the Jaguars. And my defensive player of the podcast has to be the guy that ran roughshod on that Saints offensive line that is horrendous, and that is Cardinals defensive end B.J. Ojulari. The edge rusher had 5 tackles, 4.5 sacks, and a forced fumble in that 21-16 win over the Saints. And with that, that's going to lead me to ask the Chief questions as I go ahead and bring them up in the background here so I can show you what they look like on the back end. As boom, there we go. So this is the question as it stands. If you could add one player in their prime from the team you're using's history to your current WFL squad, who would you choose? So I'm allowed to dig all the way back in Rams history for a player at his prime to put on this team now. Well, I've been told that you need an elite quarterback that basically has 99 accuracy across the board in everything to be successful in this Madden league. And apparently 80s aren't good enough, which is what my current quarterback Malik Willis has. So I will go with a guy who wasn't there long but definitely made an impact. Greatest show on turf. I'm going to go with Kurt Warner at quarterback. But there are lots of players to take from that era. I could have taken Marshall Faulk. I could have taken Torrey Holt. I could have taken Isaac Bruce. Any one of those on offense would be nice. But I think I'm going to stick with the quarterback. But if I had to make some other mentions, going back a little bit to show you I did a little research on this one and went a little historical on this one because I do remember some players in Rams history. How about a guy like, I don't know, Eric Dickerson? That would be a nice one to get, especially in his prime, his rookie years with the Rams. One of the earlier ones to get 2,100 yards rushing. I mean, definitely a guy I would love to have in the backfield, especially with his long, lanky frame, running up, stand-up runner. Definitely a different style of runner than what you see nowadays. And then let's go back even further because you know what? This Rams team could also use some defense. What about Deacon Jones for off the edge? Big hand slap guy, just bat, bat. That's illegal nowadays. But, I mean, Deacon Jones is still a monster force. And I feel like he would be good in today's NFL even without the head slap getting to the quarterback. So all those guys could be honorable mentions. But I'm going to take the quarterback, and I'm going to take the elite quarterback, and I'm going to take Kurt Warner. I think Kurt Warner could make this Rams team at least better than 5 wins, maybe 6, maybe even 7. Who knows? Can dream, can't I? But that would be the guy I would pick from Rams history. So that's an interesting question. I kind of like that one. I would love to actually hear some comments about who you would take, you in the audience, who you would take with your current team. Go back in history and pick any player you want that's in their prime and put them on your current squad, and would you feel better about it? I mean, wouldn't it be nice to have, if you're the Dolphins, I don't know, Dan Marino back under center? Wouldn't it be nice, too, if you're the Lions, hey, Barry, come on back for another year or two. How about when you run the ball really well now that we're good? Just some things that just popped up in my head as I was answering this question. So a good question from Austin Jackson there in the Patriots. Hopefully maybe you guys will answer and leave some comments of guys that you would like on your team from your team's past. Even if it's not a team you're a fan of, get you doing a little historical looking, especially if you've got one of the older teams that have been around a long time. So maybe a team like the Packers or something along those lines. But with that, that's going to end this show. Again, there is another question on the books for GML that I will not get to in this show because I want to do the proper research for it. I've done this in the past with questions that come in as the show is nearing the distribution, especially if I'm about to go live or if I'm about to record. I don't want to have to do research and delay myself any further. So I will answer the question about GML and from Aragon on the next show. And it will be about GML quarterbacks in particular, but I'll go in more detail in that show, and it'll lead off that particular Ask the Chief segment. But with that in mind, that is the end of the show, folks. Thank you very, very much for tuning in, whether it's live as the premiere goes or with the recording after the fact. I do appreciate it. The WFL community appreciates it, and we hope you are entertained by the show. Let us know by throwing us a like, a subscribe, or leaving comments like I mentioned earlier. Any feedback, good or bad, is always appreciated. And until next time, not next week, but next time, folks, the corner is closed.